Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses again. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training. Sorry, a little bit late this morning due to a slight technical gremlin with the Wi-Fi signal, which still isn't fully fixed, but hopefully the show will go out smoothly. It's a fairly miserable grey-looking day here in London. Not surprising really since Wimbledon started, and today is show number 150 on Wednesday the 30th of June, the last day of the first month of summer. So what have we got for you in today's webcast? Well, Elevenses has hit 150. Mag's new vision for road safety, we'll take a look at that. Malaya, you can get 50% off a police speeding ticket. The VAir motorcycle is a fresh new approach to aerodynamics, which takes us quite surprising route. I'm going to invite you to a live presentation of the Science of Being Seen talk, which will be on Wednesday, 7th of July. I'll update you with that in a moment. We'll have a quick look at a Swedish e-bike with classic looks but a 21st century price. Honda have filed patents for a weird regenerative braking system, and we'll finish off with a discussion point about why so many riders think a 70 plus horsepower bike might be for learners. So settle yourself down, grab yourself a brew and a biscuit, and don't forget you can catch me on this show every Wednesday and Sundays at 11 here on Facebook. So, okay. So 2 astonishing feats in 2 days. Yesterday evening, the England football team accomplished the apparently impossible by putting one over the German team by beating them in a major tournament for the first time since 1966. Sadly, I actually remember that particular game. I didn't actually watch it on TV, but I was out with my parents. We were on holiday. We were just crossing the border actually from southern Germany into Switzerland, and as we literally crossed the border post at Switzerland, we were stopped by the Swiss border guards, and my parents were pulled out of the car literally and made to dance around and plied with alcohol as well. And they were completely bemused, of course, and it was explained that England had just beaten Germany in the World Cup final at Wembley. So, yes, that was 1966. It was an awful long time ago. Rather less history behind the Elevenses show, but I am quite pleased to say that we've hit show number 150 today. When I started running these shows, it was back in the very first days of lockdown. The regulars will probably recall that. And I can honestly say I really didn't expect to be running them still all these months later. Now, viewing figures have dropped off a little bit over the months, probably because people have gone back to work. But it's nice there is a bunch of regulars who tune in live or on catch-up. But I will ask you to do one thing today to help support the show. If you've been here enjoying it regularly for the last 16 months or so, please try to share the show on social media with just a few words of actually what you enjoy about it, why you find it good enough for you to return to. If we can get a few more viewing numbers, that would be fantastic. I don't expect to be challenging some of the influencers on YouTube or TikTok anytime soon, but a few extra people would be great. So anyway, on with the news. First thing to say is that MAG, the Motorcycle Action Group, have launched what they term a new vision for road safety. Their welcoming roads is what they call an evolution of the Vision Zero approach, and aims at promoting safer roads for all groups of road users, including pedestrians, cyclists, drivers, horse riders, and, of course, motorcyclists. Now, just to remind you, if you don't know what Vision Zero is, it's a philosophy that states that deaths and serious injuries on the roads are not actually inevitable. And if they're not inevitable, therefore they're not acceptable. So road safety, therefore, becomes the ultimate priority. And anything like personal mobility, economics of running the road network, and all other considerations emissions essentially become subordinated to reducing road casualties. And the usual routes are through smarter engineering, education, and of course enforcement. Now, the original concept came from Sweden in the late 1990s, and but certainly by the 2010s, the Vision Zero had been adopted as a policy by hundreds of cities around the world. And this, of course, entailed, as we probably know, rebuilding and closing streets to calm traffic and reduce vehicle journeys, launching public awareness campaigns, and even retraining police departments. So what has happened? Well, globally, some cities, it's true, have seen big reductions in casualties. Others, whilst espousing Vision Zero and sinking a lot of cash in as well, have actually seen casualties climb. MAG argue that here in recent years in the UK, although that there have been improvements in the statistics, they have stalled in the last few years. And so their press release says, for many years, MAG have voiced significance and concerns about the elements of the Vision Zero brand. We support aspects of the Vision Zero approach, but believe that the ideological goal of zero casualties falls short of the test of pragmatism. Our proposal seeks to preserve the successful aspects of Vision Zero whilst shedding unhelpful baggage. We believe this could break the stagnation currently encountered in the Vision Zero philosophy. Okay, so pragmatism, there's an interesting word when connected with Vision Zero, because basically they contradict each other. So what do MAG think will work where other Vision Zero efforts have failed, or at best have had limited success? Well, they've created a manifesto which is to be distributed to road safety professionals and stakeholder groups in order to generate debate. And crucially, and I like this idea, MAG have asked for help to refine and develop their proposal. MAG's Director of Campaigns and Political Engagement, Colin Brown, said, "This proposal is not an attack on Vision Zero, nor do we deny that more needs to be done to improve safety on our roads. The vision to end all road casualties is laudable, but I fear that in the real world it is seen as impractical and unachievable by many. Casualties occur in the imperfect real world. Ignoring this obvious fact can lead to a rejection of efforts to improve road safety." There's much baggage that comes with the ideological mantra, the Vision Zero idea. And I have, one of the things that Colin says is that he feels that many motorcyclists are feeling second place, if they're put that high up, in the current rush to promote alternative transport modes and to do perform tasks like traffic calming. And he says he doesn't believe it's intent, but the perception is critical, especially when the goal is to change behaviours. Now, I do have a lot of sympathy with that view. A pandemic greener roads initiative closed a number of local roads in this area. And the argument was that it prevents them being used as a rat run, opens up those roads to make them more pleasant for walking and cycling, and reduces pollution around houses and the schools, which is all fair argument. But of course, what it means is that even more traffic gets funneled onto the main roads that those road users were trying to avoid. Most of the people using these roads are actually locals themselves. It's not as if it's long distance drivers cutting through to avoid a bottleneck. It's all local people trying to get from one side of an area to another, literally just a few minutes apart. So what that means for me, even on the bike, is that the simple journey that used to take me 5 minutes is now almost twice the length, and it takes more than 10 minutes. So I'm basically stuck in heavier traffic. I'm having to filter rather than ride slowly along roads which are almost deserted, and I'm using probably twice the amount of fuel to get from A to B. So I'm not only delayed in my journey, it's costing me more in the pocket, and my bike is producing more pollution. So it's really hard to see how that benefits anyone, particularly as these roads are not ones where you see huge numbers of cyclists or pedestrians. It's not pleasant roads to walk down. You're not going to be walking down these residential streets for recreational purposes. So basically, MAG's calling on everybody to enter into the debate, and they hope that it will be perceived as a positive contribution to road safety. And I certainly back them on that one. No, don't forget, if you do have a comment or a question or any feedback on the shows, do drop me a line and I will try to get back to you. For example, Cheryl has just said good morning, so hi there, Cheryl. So the next story is quite an interesting little one. It comes from Malaysia, and if you get a road traffic ticket at the moment, you'll get 50% off the fine. I don't think that's a reason for going out and getting a ticket to save money, but I suppose it is good if you have got one already. Now, the offer is from the Royal Malaysian Police, and it runs from mid-June until Friday, July the 18th, so mid-July. And all you appear to have to do to claim your 50% discount is to pay online. Now, there is a serious side to this, of course, and as with so many odd things that have happened over the last 16 months, it's a response to the COVID-19 crisis. It turns out that payment counters are currently closed. So basically, they're trying to get people to pay online rather than wait, possibly run up more fines from delaying payment on their ticket. Now, okay, I'm always interested in novel motorcycles, and this one is certainly one. This is a UK-based company, White Motorcycle Concepts, and they are building a bike to have a crack at the land speed record for electrically powered motorcycles. Now, that currently stands at 228 miles per hour, or 364 kph if you prefer that. And right now it's held by former world champion Max Biaggi. Now, nothing new there then, you might be thinking. Trying to build a bike to beat a speed record. Guy Martin's just had a crack at that as well. But this bike, known as the VAir, will be ridden by Rob White, who's better known for stints in F1 and Le Mans supercar racing. And what it does is take an entirely new approach to aerodynamics, and this is how it does it. It's actually hollow. That dark patch that you see in the middle of the fairing is actually a tunnel that runs right through the bike and out the far side. So where you would normally find a motorcycle's headstock, petrol tank and frame, what you'll find is a big hole. The battery is carried low down in a box under the rider's seat. Now, it combines obviously enough with the conventional airflow being smoothed over the rider, but White claims that this new design is actually the most aerodynamically efficient two-wheeler on the planet. Now, motorcycles, generally speaking, are hideously non-aerodynamic. The Hayabusa, for example, which is probably the slipperiest production bike around at the moment, has a CD, a coefficient of drag, which is around 0.35 or 0.36. Now, just to give you a benchmark for that, the Mercedes-Benz new EQS car, which they claim is the world's most aerodynamic production car, has a drag coefficient of 0.2. The VAir cuts that back to just 0.11. So that's not just quite a significant reduction in drag, as the press release claims. It's actually a quite remarkable figure. And it's actually right up there with those solar-powered cars that you may have seen, the things that look more like limpets with wheels than cars. So how have they created the reduction in drag? Well, basically, they say it's because of the reduction in frontal area created by the hole. The tunnel apparently reduces frontal drag by 70% based on testing at the UK's MIRA facility. That's the Motor Industries Research Association, I think. It also achieves something else. It achieves an extra loading on the front wheel. There's more than 5 times the normal load on the front tyre, which is presumably to help increase stability in a straight line. So how's the wheel actually steered if there are no forks going through the hole? Well, the answer is it's suspended on a wishbone, and it appears to be steered by cable. The front wheel is also driven by two 20 kilowatt motors. Well, it's not quite clear how. There's no obvious means of transferring power to the front wheel unless the motors are actually in the wheel itself. Well, I haven't been able to find out how that works. However, the rear wheel is by a conventional chain drive, and there are a pair of 30 kilowatt motors pushing that around. So the total output for the whole bike is around 134 horsepower. And the design team believes that even with that fairly modest power output, the aerodynamic factor should allow them to exceed 250 miles per hour, which is more than 400 kph. So the bike is planned to have a crack at the British Electric semi-streamed motorcycle record later this year, and they hope the world record sometime next year. So, okay, don't forget, you can catch up with Survival Skills every Wednesday and Sunday at 11 BST. It will be here recorded, of course, on Facebook for you to view after the live show. And it also goes out an hour or so later. I put the recording up on my YouTube channel, Survival Skills UK. Don't forget the UK at the end, or you will end up with watching somebody rubbing two Boy Scouts together to light a fire. Right, okay, so don't forget to, as I mentioned earlier, you have an invitation to watch the Science of Being Seen presentation. I'll just put the link up for you. It will be available on Wednesday, the 7th of July at 8 o'clock. And any minute now, I will get the link up. There we go, it should be up now. Now, what is Science of Being Seen? Well, it's a presentation I created myself personally over the winter of 2011-2012, and it was the third accident prevention module for the Kent Fire and Rescue's pilot biker down courses. So Science of Being Seen is actually an in-depth investigation into the most common motorcycle crash of all, the sorry mate I didn't see you Smidsey collision. And the idea is to give riders a better understanding of how, where and why these collisions happen, and then offer some simple strategies, practical strategies for actually staying out of trouble. So it's designed to solve a very practical riding problem, but it is based firmly on science. There's a body of information that dates back to the 1970s, which is all accessible if you can get to it online, and if you can understand it when you read it. Well, fortunately, with a science background, I know where to look, and I have a reasonable grasp of what they're writing about. That's all been put together onto the Science of Being Seen website, so that's open to anybody to go and look at. It's also regularly updated, and basically it provides the full background to my presentation, including giving you references to where the work came from. So we do have the Science of Being Seen. I've just got a little banner for you here, which I completely forgot to put up. There it is. What happened? Well, after the biker down run for that first year in 2012, we were nominated for and actually awarded one of the Prince Michael of Kent International Road Safety Awards, which we duly collected at the Savoy Hotel in London in November that year. We've also won an industry award for the biker down course. So Science of Being Seen actually ended up being used by more and more biker down courses across London, across the UK. It basically made up the third module for many of the biker down courses. Now, unfortunately, all that came to an end in March 2020, of course, when COVID shut down biker down courses. I delivered the last one in February 2020, and rather sadly, I was told just recently that I won't be needed to deliver them again, as they're going to have a different module. I can't say I blame them. It's been up there for 9 years, so it's probably about time. SOBS has gone out there. It's been delivered to groups and clubs all around the UK, either via Zoom or in person. And there is a book of the presentation as well, which is also available. And of course, you'll probably remember that I went out to New Zealand in 2018 and 2019 to deliver Science of Being Seen for Shiny Side Up out there. And I was a virtual speaker earlier this year in 2021. And I also delivered it on the Road Safety GB powered two-wheeler event back this spring. So basically, Science of Being Seen, just very quickly, it looks at the range of problems that drivers have at junctions, which include looked but could not see. There are various reasons for that, including the sort of beam blindness issue and the constant bearing issue. I'll like to be explaining both of those, but it means the driver doesn't see the bike at all. We'll look at failed to see collisions where the bike was visible, but for some reason the driver didn't spot it. We'll look at the saw and forgot issue, where short-term memory plays tricks on us. We see things and then forget we've seen them because there's so much else going on. And then finally, there is the seen but misjudged speed and distance issue, which tends to happen on faster roads. So we'll take a look at the effectiveness or otherwise of passive safety aids like high-vis clothing and day riding lights, and I'll suggest some general ideas on how to make them more effective. But finally, we'll conclude with some proactive riding advice to try to help riders understand how to stay out of a collision. So this is your chance to see the full and original Science of Being Seen presentation, completely updated with the latest research. Now, there is a modest ticket price for this, £5, because I received no funding for SOBs. I have never received any funding for Science of Being Seen. It's all been entirely self-funded, even though everything about it is free to access by anybody who wants to look at the project. So there is that small charge. Attendance will be limited to 30 people to give you a chance to ask questions and me to sort of basically deal with that. The timing is 7:50 virtual doors open, 8 o'clock presentation, 8:45 question time approximately, and then 9 o'clock-ish we'll call it quits unless there are lots more questions, in which case I'll run on till I run through them. I aim to make this presentation on a regular basis, so if you can't make this one, don't panic. There is another already scheduled for the first Wednesday in August. If you click the link, you will find you get taken to the ticketing location. So that's the link to go to. That takes you to my Tidy HQ page, which deals with the ticketing and payment issues for me. Right, okay, so pop in there if you want to see Science of Being Seen online, and I will remind you on Monday and Wednesday next week's. Clive has looked in and said he's a bit late. Well, never mind, Clive, you can catch up. I was just talking about how you can catch up on these shows, and Paul's also a bit of a late arrival, but good to see both of you. Right, okay, so that is the Science of Being Seen. So on with some more news. We just talked about the land speed record attempt VAir motorcycle. But at the other end of the spectrum is yet another electric motorcycle startup. Have a look at that one. Have you heard of RGNT motorcycles? Neither have I. I presume it's pronounced Regent. The company is Swedish, and they're about to roll out their first bike. That one that you see there, which is very originally called Number One. You can actually see that on the engine casing, the battery box below the tank. Its debut has been delayed by the pandemic, but it is expected to appear next month. And actually, it's quite an attractive bike in a way. It's a sort of very 1970s looking, and one report suggested that it's a dead ringer for this particular machine, which was Yamaha's hugely popular RX100 two-stroke. I dare say they will be somewhat different to ride. The Regent, anyway, is capable of 11 kilowatts, 14.7 horsepower, which is basically bang on the learner legal limit. And that should push it to around about 125k or 78 miles an hour, which seems about right. It's sort of ballpark for something like the baby what's it called? I've forgotten. It's the 125 V twin Honda, which is one of the better 125s. You don't see them that, unfortunately, these days. 7.7 kilowatt battery. That should push it around 150k or 93 miles on a full charge, although I suspect that'll probably suffer if you are riding it on open roads at speeds. It does benefit from regenerative braking, and it tops up in 4 hours from a standard socket. Conventional steel frame, standard telescopic forks, dual rear shocks, disc brakes with CBS but no ABS. The trick bits are LED lights and a digital touch infotainment center with GPS. I'm still hearing people saying electric motorcycles are heavy. There was a whole discussion about how heavy they are on a motorcycle forum the other day, which makes me wonder whether anybody ever reads spec sheets. But this particular bike is 130 kilos, which is just under 290 pounds for those who still think in old money. And that's not far off what the old CG 175 used to weigh. One area where the bike falls short of the ubiquitous Yamaha that we've just seen is the price tag. This one will set you back no less than 9,500 euros, and that will make it a tough sell, I fear. Talking of regenerative braking, Honda have just filed a patent on a new system of recovering energy from motorcycles. If there's one thing you can guarantee, though, about Honda, it's if there is a complicated way of doing something, they will try to find it. You may remember the CX500. Lovely bike. I had one. It was one of Honda's more successful motorcycles in the mid-80s, and it carried thousands of dispatch riders millions of miles around London. Oddly enough, I used mine for touring rather than dispatching, but it was a V-twin, of course, so that means the cylinders are stuck out sideways in the open air. So they're actually one of the easiest designs to air cool, but Honda naturally decided that they would make it water cooled. And then they did something else. They actually twisted the cylinder heads in at the rear so that the carburetors didn't bang on the rider's knee. Moto Guzzi style. So basically that meant that they couldn't use a chain to reach the camshaft. So it had to have push rods. But to keep the rev limit reasonably high and keep the power up, which is why they needed water cooling in the first place, they had to use very short push rods. So what that meant was they actually needed a cam anyway, but the cam was high up in the middle of the V. So as far as I know, it's the only bike with push rods and a cam chain. So it's not too surprising that when Honda look at something like recovering energy on deceleration, they do it in a completely novel way. Now, virtually every hybrid and electric car and many of the bikes like the Zero and little Regents that we've just seen will recover energy when you shut the throttle or even tread on the brakes. Now, with motorcycles, the recovery is normally through the motor which is driving the bike, which is on the rear wheel. So that means when you do apply the front brake, you are effectively wasting that energy from momentum. So if you can do all your slowing down through shutting the throttle, you'll get better mileage. But if you do need to hit the front brake, that's the best stopping brake, of course. You are wasting that energy, converting motion simply into heat. So Honda's new patent involves a two-wheel drive design, which appears to add an electrically driven hydraulic system to the front wheel. So when slowing, the system works as a pump, producing regenerative braking. That's all I know at the moment, but unless it's significantly more efficient than simply using the drive motor to run backwards, it's hard to see how all that extra weight and complexity all hung sort of around the front wheel is going to be a real benefit. So something to look out for anyway. There is plenty of technological change coming our way, even though we may never see that particular change on a motorcycle. Now, I'm just into today's discussion point, but before I get there, I'll just remind you that if you enjoy the show, you can always pop over to my Ko-fi page. I've just put the December 2018 Tips on Tuesday series up, and I've had a couple of positive comments on those, that they were very enjoyable to read. they were a series on crashes that you've never had, if I remember correctly. So do pop over there and have a look at those. One of them at least is free to read if you want to support me. For the fairly miserable sum of £3, you'll get access for 30 days to all the others. There are 400 plus articles over there now. So, okay. Today's discussion point then was prompted by a question from one of my regular correspondents. Jeff rides an SV650. He passed his test a few years ago, done a post-test training course with me, but he wonders why it is that so many riders nowadays see a bike like his, which is after all 70 odd horsepower, 125 mile per hour bike. They ask, why is it a learner machine? Well, it's the side effect of the rider training rules. When everybody was learning on a 125 or a 250 rather, that's when I cut my teeth back in the mid to late 70s, sadly. The 250 was the standard learner bike, but people saw machines like my 404 with its 30 odd horsepower and its 105 mile per hour top speed as an adequate machine for all purpose riding. I used mine for, getting to work while I was working in a conventional job. I used it for a month-long tour of Europe. When I came home from that, I used it for dispatch riding, and it lasted 80 odd thousand miles, about 85,000 miles, I think, before it got stolen. And that was a genuine go anywhere, do anything bike with 30 horsepower. Honda's 60 odd 7 horsepower 750, of course, was a super bike. And dare I say it, only real men, yes, it's sexist, I know, were invited to apply for the Z900 from Kawasaki. So that was the sort of mid 70s. In 82, learners were cut back to a 125. Now, there were still plenty of 400s around at that time, although they were mostly Super Dreams by now. And again, they were being used perfectly happily in all roles. 550s were seen as quite big bikes. My brother had a Honda 550. The CX I've just talked about came out round about that time, the early 80s. And whilst there were, excuse me, litre and litre plus bikes around, they were quite honestly often seen as a bit bulky. The XS 1100 from Yamaha, you may recall. People liked it, but it, a lot of people thought it was a bit too big. So where did it all change? Why did people stop being happy with middleweight motorcycles? Well, the answer was direct access. 1997. I was running a GS 500E as a motorcycle courier bike. I went all over the country on it. It went from one end of the UK to another on a regular basis. I toured all over France on that bike with a tent stuck on the back. I used it on my first track day, and I even used it as my first instructor bike. But all of a sudden, it was the bike that people were learning on, along with bikes like the CB500 and the ER5. So what did DAS do that was positive? Well, what it did is it meant that riders were no longer trying to ride a 125 and learn on one of those and then jump on a GSXR 1100 the very next day. And I honestly did know people who tried that, and there was a bit of a gulf between the two bikes, quite frankly. Now, a 50 odd horsepower twin like the GS 500 certainly isn't a 140 horsepower Gixxer, but it is a lot more ballpark than an 11 horsepower single. A CB 500 or a GS 500 and certainly the ER5, they all had some physical mass. They were the right size of bike, roughly speaking. A CG by comparison is about 3/4 scale model if you go and sit on one. And they had some weight, which meant that if you got it a bit wrong, they would topple over, and they did on a fairly regular basis with novice riders on board. They would also wheel spin and they would stoppy. I can remember telling a rider not to give it too much handful as he was coming out onto a a road where I could see that there had been a bit of diesel spilt. It wasn't much, but it was a bit of slightly shiny surface. So I just told him to take it easy. He didn't listen because he was a 125 rider. He did exactly what he did on his 125, twisted the throttle, and yep, somehow or other he stayed on from the rather spectacular and lurid back end step out. But you know, you would be hard pressed to have done that on a 125 like a CG. But the trouble was that it made people think that having jumped off a 500, they were now ready to handle a bigger bike. So not surprisingly, those newly qualified riders came out of training schools with their shiny new license, looking for a shiny new bike. And in most cases, what they picked were the 600 Super Sports. It was their heyday, you probably recall. So just a few cc's bigger, but around double the power. So all the shift to the A category bikes did was it moved the goalposts up another notch when we got the new tiered license system in, which introduced bikes like the XJ6 and the Hornet as learner bikes. People started looking a notch further up from those. I mean, I regularly see bikes like the 890 KTM, which are forget how many horsepower that is, way over 100, I think, promoted as a suitable bike for a newly qualified rider. The Triumph Trident is being pitched at precisely that market. There are plenty of other bikes if you look around, which MT09 is another one which people often say is a good bike for a new rider. So, you know, if the problem is, of course, that when these riders are training on these XJ6 and Hornets and SV650s, one thing they've never done is open the throttle all the way to the stop and hold it there as the engine revs. So they've no idea how fast these bikes will accelerate. Now, you may remember that show 142 on June the 3rd, the discussion point was looking at how much power we actually used whilst riding. Now, this was based on a magazine article from 2006 when Ride stuck a data logger basically on a GSX R600. So they were actually able to find out how much power 4 of their staff actually used whilst lapping their favourite test route. The team racer was the only one who managed to get the throttle open to the stop, and then only for a moment or two. And he actually lapped the course at more than the national speed limit. So that gives you some idea about his speeds on the roads. Emma Franklin managed to use an average of 11.1 horsepower, and even she managed a 47.4 mile per hour lap, which is pretty quick on the average selection of A and B roads. So 11 horsepower, that's actually all the CG125 makes. Okay, you wouldn't be riding the CG quite so quickly, but because she did actually use a maximum of a whole 39.4 horsepower, which is quite a bit less than the output of a restricted 500cc A2 license bike. But people still say, "Oh, you'll get bored with anything smaller." How anyone thinks they can get bored with a 90-odd horsepower motor in something like the Honda Hornet, a bike that wheelies off the throttle and has a top speed of between 125 and 130 miles an hour? I have absolutely no idea. You know, when I'm out on the track on the admittedly not the rocket fast riders, but you know, when I'm doing the Indy circuit there, it's really only at the end of that straight that the bikes with twice the horsepower actually get past me, and even that's mostly on the brakes because I'm a bit of a wuss on the brakes. And you know, how fast can you get around a 50 mile per hour bend? Think about it. And the whole problem's compounded with the arms race that the manufacturers are investing in. I just mentioned the 890 KTM. Well, that's supplanted the 790 KTM, which has been retired. You can actually still find that 790. It's been pensioned off to China, and so it's being stuck in motorcycles over there. But with all that power, people are starting to require ABS, traction control, and generally a bunch of rider aids. Personally, my feeling, and I stick with this, is we'd nearly all be happier on smaller, lighter machines. That's my belief, and I'm going to stick to that. And on that note, I'm going to call it quits for today's show. So don't forget the invitation to the Science of Being Seen presentation. Tickets are available through the link that I've already put up. It's Wednesday, the what was it? I said 6th of July, wasn't it? I've forgotten already. Let's just double back through my notes and check. Where was I? I've completely lost it. 7th of July, Wednesday, 7th of July at 8 p.m. So yeah, do log on then if you can. And don't forget, I did also put up a new ebook on my Ko-fi site about filtering. Was it filtering? I can't remember. I haven't prepared myself today very well, have I? I'm a bit half asleep, obviously. Too excited after watching the football. So I'm just going to say cheerio. Thanks for looking in and ride safe out there. Bye for now.